The first time I noticed the missing minute, I thought a tenant was trying to get me fired. Her name was Mrs. Alvarez, and she came down to the security desk at 3:20 in the morning wearing slippers, a raincoat, and the expression people get when they are forcing themselves to stay calm for someone else's sake. She asked me why I had been knocking on her door on the 4th floor 5 minutes earlier. I told her I had not left the lobby. She said someone in a dark uniform had knocked 3 times, very softly, and when she looked through the peephole, the hallway camera above the elevator was off. Then she said something that stayed with me. She said the person outside her door had my posture. At the time, I worked nights at the Belmere Apartments, an old 6-story building with a leaky roof, bad wiring, and the kind of long, narrow hallways that never seem fully lit no matter how many fluorescent fixtures you replace. It was not the worst job I ever had. Mostly I watched monitors, signed for late deliveries, called maintenance when pipes acted up, and told college kids to keep the noise down after midnight. The building had 16 cameras total, but only one of them ever gave me trouble. Camera 4 East covered the 4th floor hallway from the elevator bank to the last unit at the end. 4E, which had been vacant for months. On the live feed, the corridor always looked colder than the others. Same beige paint, same carpet runner, same fire doors. But on that monitor, the light had a dead green cast, like the camera could not quite remember how indoor light was supposed to look. After Mrs. Alvarez went back upstairs, I rewound the footage. At 3:13:59 seconds, the hall was empty. At 3:15:0 seconds, the hall was still empty. Everything between those timestamps was gone. No static, no error message, no distortion. Just a clean 1-minute absence, as if the building had blinked. The strange part was what came after. On the first frame, when the image returned, the doormat outside 4C was crooked. I knew it had been straight before the gap, because I am the kind of person who notices dumb details when I am bored. By the time the footage came back, the mat had been pushed halfway into the hall, like someone had stepped on it hard and dragged their foot. I checked the other nights, same thing. Every night at exactly 3:14, camera 4 East lost 1 minute. Most of the time the only changes were small. A chain lock hanging loose on a door that had been flushed before. A wet crescent on the carpet outside 4D, even though the hallway was dry. The elevator standing open at 3:15 when nobody had been waiting for it at 3:13. Once, the potted plant outside 4B had turned a few inches, its leaves facing the wall instead of the hall. Another time, the light outside 4E was on after the cut, even though that unit had no tenant and the breaker inside was supposed to be off. I logged the outage for 3 nights in a row before the property manager finally looked at me over her glasses and asked if I had tried restarting the DVR. I told her I had. She asked if the gap happened on any other floor. I said no. She shrugged and said the system was old. I remember asking why nobody had replaced that camera if it had been bad for this long. She said, because it only acts up for 1 minute and nobody wants to pay a vendor to come out for 1 minute. That answer should have satisfied me. It did not. Over the next week, the missing minute stopped feeling like a hardware problem and started feeling personal. Residents on the 4th floor began coming downstairs with complaints that almost matched but never quite lined up. Mrs. Alvarez heard whispering outside her door. The guy in 4B said someone had tried the knob, very gently, like they were testing whether he was asleep. A nurse in 4D told me she heard wet shoes on the carpet every night at the same time, pacing from the far end of the hall toward the elevator, then stopping right outside her peephole. When I checked the footage, there was never anyone there. Just that one missing minute, and the hallway afterward looking slightly wrong. I started staying on the feed a few minutes before 3:14 every night. Rain made it worse. If there was a storm rolling across the city, the green tint deepened, the shadows under the apartment doors looked thicker, and sometimes the picture would jitter for 1 frame before the cut, like the camera had flinched. That was how I saw the door. One Thursday, just before the footage dropped, I paused on the last frame. Unit 4E, the vacant one at the end, was open, not wide, just an inch of black between the door and the frame. I sat there staring at it long enough for the DVR timer to dim. I knew 4E was supposed to be empty because maintenance stored old paint cans in there, and the lock had been changed after the last tenant left. The next night I watched again. The door was shut before the cut. When the image came back, there was a wet footprint outside 4E. The night after that, there were 2. The shape was wrong for a shoe. Too narrow at the heel. Too long in the middle, like someone had stood on the carpet in soaked socks and leaned their weight forward. I printed stills and took them to Luis, the daytime super. He looked at them for a long time and then told me to stop checking that feed alone. I asked him what that meant. He said the former night guard used to keep screenshots from 4 East in a desk drawer. He had quit without notice last winter and left the drawer full of printouts. Luis threw them away because they were making everyone anxious. What was on them? He rubbed his jaw and said, hallway looked different every time. Doors open that should have been shut. Wet spots, shadows, things too close to the camera. Why didn't anyone tell me? Because telling the new guard that one hallway goes missing every night is a good way to lose the new guard. That should have been the moment I quit. Instead, I got worse. I started clipping every blackout. I put the frames side by side on my phone and zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. The differences formed a pattern. Before the missing minute, 4E was always closed. After it, something had moved farther down the hall. First, the footprint outside 4E, then the wet mark outside 4D, then the chain on 4C hanging loose, then the mat outside 4B shoved aside. Then, on a Monday night with heavy rain hammering the front awning, I came back from locking the laundry room and found a man named Caleb from 4A standing at the desk in his boxers, white as drywall dust. He asked me whether management had sent anyone to his floor. I said no. He swallowed and said somebody had stopped outside his door at 3:14 and whispered, "Open up, security." Then he looked at my name badge and said, "It sounded like you." After he went upstairs, I pulled up the feed and saw the usual gap. When the picture returned at 3:15, the camera angle had not changed, but something else had. The little red indicator light reflected in the far window by the stairwell had moved. It took me a second to understand what I was seeing. The reflection belonged to my desk radio. That reflection should have been impossible from that angle unless someone had been standing in the hallway holding the radio up toward the glass. My radio was sitting in front of me the entire time. That was the first night I went to the 4th floor before the blackout. At 3:12, I took the service stairs up with my radio, my phone, and the ring of master keys I was not supposed to use without a maintenance request. The hall smelled like damp plaster and old carpet shampoo. Rain tapped softly against the narrow window at the far end by 4E. All the apartment doors were shut. The overhead camera blinked its steady red light above the elevator. I unlocked 4E and pushed the door open. Luis had been right about the paint cans, but that was not all that was in there. The apartment smelled wrong, not stale. Wet, not fresh rain either, more like clothing left too long in a sealed washer. The living room was stripped except for drop cloths and stacked buckets. The hall to the bedroom was black, even with my flashlight on it, the beam looking weak and gray before it reached the back wall. On the floor, just inside the threshold, there were damp prints, bare feet. They did not come in from the hall. They came out of the darkness deeper inside the apartment and stopped at the door. I backed out, locked 4E, and waited by the stairwell instead. At 3:13 and 57 seconds, the fluorescent lights gave a soft buzz. At 3:14, every sound in the hallway flattened. The rain disappeared. The elevator hum disappeared. Even the cheap plastic crackle from my radio went dead in my hand. Across from me, the red light on the hallway camera went dark. Then 4E opened. Nobody stepped out at first. The door just swung inward slowly, revealing that same black interior. Not darkness like a room with no lights. Darkness like the apartment had depth where it should not have had space. Then something pale leaned into the hall. It was tall enough that it had to duck a little through the doorway. Its clothes looked dark and wet, almost like a security uniform viewed through bad reception. I could make out sleeves, shoulders, the shine of water on fabric. I could not make out a face. Where the face should have been, the air kept shifting. Not blurring, skipping like I was looking at a person through corrupted footage. It moved without hurrying, stopping outside each door with its head tilted, listening. At 4D, it put one hand against the wood. At 4C, it bent toward the peephole until the brass around it gave a faint squeal. At 4B, it tried the knob once gently. The whole time, it held its other hand low at its side. Something small dangled from it. When it passed under the emergency light near the elevator, I saw what it was. A radio. My radio. Or something that looked enough like mine to make my stomach turn. It reached 4A and spoke through the door in a voice so close to my own that my knees almost gave out. "Open up. Security." I heard movement inside the unit. A lock clicked. Without thinking, I slammed my shoulder against the stairwell door. The sound cracked through the hall like a dropped tray. The thing turned, the shifting where its face should have been fixed on me. For 1 second, I had the clear, stupid certainty that it had always known I was there. It had only been waiting to see which door I would choose. I stumbled into the stairwell and yanked the door shut. On the other side, there were no footsteps, no running, no impact, just 3 soft knocks. Then my own voice said through the metal, calm as ever, "Desk check." I do not remember getting back to the lobby. I remember the clock at 3:15. I remember the hallway camera red light turning on again in the monitor. And I remember Caleb from 4A calling down 1 minute later to ask why security had pounded on the stairwell door outside his apartment. I told the manager everything that morning. She said I had fallen asleep at the desk, had a vivid dream, and scared a tenant by running upstairs half awake. I showed her the phone video I had recorded. The file started with the 4th floor hallway at 3:13 and 58 seconds. At 3:14, it skipped. At 3:15, the frame returned with the camera pointed straight at the stairwell door. It had not been pointed there when I recorded it. Someone had to have been holding the phone for that shot. On the audio just before the clip ended, you could hear breathing from inches away from the microphone. Then a voice, my voice again, quiet and patient. Found you. I quit that afternoon. Belmir replaced me within a week. Luis texted once to ask if I was sleeping any better. I did not answer. A month later, he sent another message saying the fourth floor camera had finally been replaced. For 2 days, the new one worked perfectly. On the third night, it missed a minute. That was 6 months ago. I live across town now in a smaller building with better locks and brighter halls. I do freelance overnight dispatch work from home. I keep my apartment cameras updated, the cloud backups paid, the hallway light outside my door on all night. Yesterday, during a thunderstorm, my front door app sent a notification at 3:15 in the morning. Motion detected. I opened the clip expecting to see rain in the walkway outside or a neighbor getting home late. The video began at 3:13 and 59 seconds. My hallway was empty. Then it jumped. At 3:15 and 0 seconds, the view was different. The camera was still mounted outside my apartment, but the angle had changed just enough for me to see the end of the hall, and down there, where there should have been nothing but the fire door and a vending machine, there was another apartment door standing open an inch into the dark.